have a 15-year-old daughter and a 14-year-old daughter. And I'm sure they're tired of me driving by somewhere nearby and saying, hey, I worked on that. And do you know why that's like that? Do you know why the building is sitting this direction? Whatever it is, they're super tired of it. But that's when you geek out, right?
This is Built, a new podcast series where you'll meet the people behind some of the biggest transactions and investments in commercial real estate and hear how they got to where they are today. I'm your host, Brian Mon, Chief Marketing Officer with Fidelity National Financial. And those of us in this business, well, we know the buildings, but how many of us know the stories of the people behind those structures? Today, we're talking with Ellen Smith. Ellen is a partner at the law firm of Parker Poe in Atlanta. She is a recognized expert on land use and zoning. You know, the local laws that outline what a given piece of land can be used for and what types of activities are permitted on it. This is a big deal. Knowing how to negotiate for variances or defending against them is Ellen's specialty. She's also the incoming president of CREW Atlanta. Ellen, thank you so much for joining us today. First of all, tell us a little bit about growing up. Did you have any particular tie to real estate at all?
You know, certainly with college professors as your parents, we weren't in the commercial real estate realm, right? I'm from Augusta, and there isn't necessarily a family tie or a high school job or anything like that tied to real estate. We did, however, travel a lot growing up. So I grew up camping. I've been to all of the national parks throughout the United States and Canada. And to the extent that sort of historic or childhood travel influences, subconsciously or not, what you do, you certainly pay attention to the fact that there are different ways that property in the United States is developed or not developed. And you do sort of pay attention to your surroundings. So I don't know that it consciously influenced anything, but it certainly gave experience to draw on.
I think you've described your entrance into commercial real estate as kind of being purely luck. How did that happen? You graduate from law school, and then what? And how did you progress into commercial real estate law?
Truly, I think no one who graduates from law school knows what they want to do. They just want to get a job. Law school is like a PhD in liberal arts, right? It teaches you nothing about the practice of law in any particular way, except that it teaches you a way of thinking about something and problem solving. So yes, look, I put my resume in the drop boxes, very old school before we emailed our resumes out, interviewed on campus with a number of firms, and was hired, received an offer from a very small, 15 lawyer or less commercial real estate boutique firm, and accepted it with excitement and pleasure because it was going to be a lot of money and pay the bills.
Well, it's a good place to start for sure, especially coming right out of school. So how long did you stay at that first job until you made your move kind of officially into commercial real estate or with your current firm?
So I was hired not as a commercial real estate or transactional lawyer. I was hired to be a litigation associate because the nature of the work at the firm was primarily commercial real estate. About 4 years into practice, we had an associate leave to go in-house, and there was an opportunity to move over to the transactional side of the office because there was a need for that work. And one of the things that you learn as a litigator, litigation matters can be years and years and years, and no one is happy, right? It doesn't matter if you win. You still have spent time with folks focused on a dispute, as opposed to the transaction side where you have two sides that are really trying to come together to make a deal happen. It's much more fast-paced, much more with my personality. I can still sue people from time to time on the things that I think are important and the clients that I like and the things that I have expertise on, but that's not my jam. My jam is making the deal happen and watching the thing or things get built.
Very good. Do you remember at all your first case that you litigated when you first came out of law school?
The one that is most remarkable, yes, it was Studio X. It was a landlord-tenant dispute, and it was a live X-rated video store and dance opportunity that was right across the street from the Cheetah in Atlanta. It was there for many years. The tenant failed to pay their rent 1 month. This was after several years of dispute and the landlord wanting to sell the property. They were in a strip shopping center, no pun intended, with a, Domino's pizza and something else, and then there was Studio X. And I was the attorney in Georgia. You get to demand possession in person for a tenant default matter. I went down on a Tuesday afternoon, circled the block around 10th Street 3 times before there was a parking space open because business was so good at Studio X to deliver the demand for possession. It went up to the Court of Appeals, I think 2 or 3 times. And ultimately, they moved out after the sheriff had given their eviction notice. And when I showed up to watch the eviction happening, all of the employees were dressed in their normal attire for their job, moving videos and all kinds of things out of the building and into a truck to be taken off-site. And there's now a multi-story office building there.
Wow. That is quite the first big, memorable event in your law career. That's great.
It's never dull.
Ellen began developing her zoning expertise about 20 years ago as a newly minted lawyer. She was at her old firm representing Sprint, and cell phone towers were going up all over Georgia. A lot of counties objected because a lot of residents objected. Ellen, then a litigator, stepped in.
I have sued the majority of Georgia counties and cities very early in my career and successfully have great relationships, as surprising as it sounds, with most of the politicians that were there at the time, but also their city and county attorneys, because generally speaking, most people aren't really opposed to the provision of wireless service, and they're still not today, but they needed political cover, right? Because people didn't want a tower in their backyard.
Politicians were hearing from constituents who were not happy about cell towers sprouting in their neighborhoods. In the years since, zoning has become a big part of her practice. She loves its complexities and contradictions.
Zoning is intended to be a living, breathing document, right? Like, zoning regulations are to address and protect the public, but also to allow a property owner to maximize the development of their property and the use of their property to its highest and best use, but within a rubric that matches their neighbor's property and that provides some consistency. But if you think about it, those ideals don't always match up with, and sort of rarely match up with, a developer's idea or a property owner's idea of what could go on their property. And some of those things are noxious uses, right? I mean, you don't want typically your single family subdivision up next, against a landfill or next to, a super industrial property. And it's one of those things where I tell people zoning, I think, is character building, because people are really proud of their property and they are super proud of your property, and they're going to tell you exactly what to do on it. And some of that's okay, but some of it is just patently wrong. And therein lies the fun and the legal challenge.
Ellen graduated from law school in 2000. And even though her law school class was evenly split between men and women, when she started at her firm, there was just one other woman there, and she wasn't on the partner track.
So there weren't other women in my firm to look up to. They hadn't had an equity partner in many years. The firm opened in 1984, and I think it had one equity female partner that was fairly short-lived. And in commercial real estate, in litigation, there aren't that many female lawyers. There are more female judges because I think more sort of get off of the partnership track at a private firm and go into public service with respect to the court system. So from a litigation standpoint, often I'm the only woman in the room, client or attorney, whether we're on the same side or not. And for commercial real estate, still am almost always the only female.
She tells the story of working on a project with another woman called Helen. So there was Ellen and Helen.
And we were the only two females out of about a team of 30 working on the project. She was an engineer. So out of the architects, the client representatives, the project managers, all of the construction consultants and other professionals on the team, we often were on weekly calls where they would just say, Ellen, Helen, answer the question. I'm like, well, there's a big difference between a lawyer and an engineer, right? And it's something that she and I still laugh about today. And that project, just to put it in perspective, kicked off in December of 2014. So fairly recent in the grand scheme of things. Not a bad thing or a good thing. I think it's just, there is definitely a perspective that I think being a woman brings. There's also, I will say in 20 years, I think it has changed for the better. And there's now a little more awareness about having a voice, whether it's male or female, whether it's gender-based or, frankly, age. It's a recognition that every person in the team brings something to the experience and a different perspective.
And that brings me to CREW, Commercial Real Estate Women. The network was founded over 30 years ago to bring women in all different areas of commercial real estate together, to exchange information and to help each other succeed. It's now a global network with around 12,000 members. Ellen is president-elect of the Atlanta chapter of CREW. One thing she loves about the network, it respects women's time.
Things start on time and end on time. I can tell you exactly how many minutes we've been talking. I bill my life in 6-minute increments. When I am involved in CREW or any other organization, I am involved in giving my time. So it's truly something that is taking time away from my ability to, do my job and bill my client. It's a worthwhile investment tenfold because you can start and finish a project with a member of CREW. It's not like the bar where it's a bunch of lawyers. You can build, redevelop, service any project that's commercial real estate project, whether it's a multifamily project or industrial project. I can find a network of people that can help me or help my client and put my client in touch with someone if they need something done. So for that, it's an invaluable investment.
You've been a part of some high profile and large transactions in your career, specifically on the deal side. Which one stands out for you?
I will say this. It's always exciting, right, to drive by something. I have a 15-year-old daughter and a 14-year-old daughter. And I'm sure they're tired of me driving by somewhere nearby and saying, hey, I worked on that. And do you know why that's like that? Do you know why the building is sitting this direction or why there's a flagpole in the front or in the back versus a dumpster, whatever it is? They're super tired of it. But that's when you geek out, right? And you think, okay, I worked on this. And there's a sense of pride for it actually coming out of the ground. And the one that I would say would be the one that is sort of the high profile would be Mercedes-Benz USA.
Mercedes was moving its headquarters from New Jersey to Sandy Springs, just outside Atlanta. It needed to build an entire corporate campus in its new location.
It was super interesting because my job should have been pretty finite, right? Go get the entitlements for a 200,000 square foot office building, which is certainly not the biggest building, certainly not the biggest square footage. But the history of the property that they ultimately selected was that it was the last 76 acres that was in Sandy Springs that was undeveloped and was highly visible to the area around and the neighborhoods around. There was a house there that was location for the Vampire Diaries. If you watched that historic building was coming down, and the family that had owned that property for decades was selling it.
The job went on a lot longer than Ellen thought it would.
It should have just been like, go get your zoning for an office building, right? No biggie. You deal with the things like traffic, noise, light. There were multiple complications in the zoning, more than 100, I think, property owner and neighbor meetings, just because it was part of a mixed use. So there was multifamily component, there's a retail component. There were lots of things happening, but also, my job should have ended August of 2015. We got the zoning, everything was approved. They'll move forward to get building permits. They were, tasked with relocating turtles. There was a native plant harvest from the local gardening group because this property had not been developed. It truly was, 30 some odd acres of what neighbors thought was sort of park land.
And there were other complications involving both the natural world and the built one. Those took a lot of people, many months to sort out.
And that was a project that was sort of start to finish. Commercial Real Estate Women, CREW Atlanta, had involvement on almost all sides of that project. So CREW members represented the Fulton County Development Authority with respect to the issuance of bonds, represented the title company issuing owners' policies and lease policies, represented brokers on all sides of the transaction, lawyers on all sides of the transaction. So that was also something I think I'm pretty proud of.
Slightly different than that phone call you had many years ago where there were 30 and then Helen and Ellen.
Indeed. That's right.
I'd like to end by just asking you and having you talk a little bit about advice for the young commercial real estate member of CREW or the young attorney that's coming up in your firm. Advice for them, how to navigate, how to be successful like you?
Yeah. First, I hope I'm successful. I think I am. So I think there are sort of two things that someone taught me very early on in my career, like the first day I started as a practicing attorney. And one of those is I'm in the South, right? Your podcast is going to be heard maybe all over, but I grew up using Mr. and Mrs. as just a courtesy, not anything else. And as you grow in your career and start your career, whatever profession you're in, whether law or otherwise, I would say, and someone said this to me, always call people by their first name. You say, Brian, hey, I'm Ellen, right? Because it level sets. Someone is calling you for professional advice. Doesn't matter if they're 5 years older, 20 years older, or 5 years younger. First name, you're on a professional basis, use it. And that sounds silly, but for a woman in commercial real estate, it makes the difference. If I say Mr., before any salutation or greeting, I'm automatically saying you are more important than me, and my advice is not something that you should pay for. And that's a problem.
She says her other advice may sound like basic business etiquette, but it's important. Number one,
don't be afraid to pick up the phone and do that or meet face to face, because email, text, all of those things are great and efficient. They do not convey tone, and they do not help you establish a relationship. So there are clients that text me and I respond to them by text. There are people that I've worked with for 20 years. And if I haven't gotten that basic relationship established, that isn't going to be the most effective way to communicate. And the third that I say to myself all the time still, and I say to young associates, is it has to be done quickly, right? We move in a very fast-paced environment, and responsiveness to the client is key. But accurate and correctness is more important. So do it fast, but do it right.
Ellen, thank you so much for your time. I know that it is very valuable, but we appreciate you sharing with us your history and giving us some time.
Thanks so much. I appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Built. We hope you enjoyed it. We'd love to hear your feedback. Email us at built@fnf.com. We'll be back in a couple of weeks with another show. Built is a co-production of Fidelity National Financial and PRX Productions. From FNF, our project is run by Annie Bartolus. At PRX, our team is producer Ashley Milntite, senior producer Genevieve Sponsler, production assistant Courtney Florentine, and intern Claire Carlander. Audio mastering by Rebecca Seidel. The executive producer of PRX Productions is Jocelyn Gonzalez. I'm Brian Mon. Every story is unique, every property is individual, but we're all part of this built world.